Open an app, sign in, homepage, Open an app, sign in, homepage, sign up for Medium, and get an extra one. Andrea Bauer. November 8, 2019. 6 Minutes read. Stop saying homeless people should just get a job. Are you going to hire them? Photo, by Caitlin Wilson on Unsplash. The most frustrating thing about people who say that the homeless should just get a job is that they typically already know how unrealistic they're being. The intent of this sentiment is not to empower the homeless or promote some kind of solution, but rather to dismiss their struggle and make it easier to look away. Many urban job markets are so competitive today that even people with bachelor's degrees are gratefully accepting minimum wage jobs that have nothing to do with their drastically overpriced education. In reality, the actual belief behind this get a job standpoint is that if a person can no longer participate in our capitalist society, they need to just go away already. This is a particularly gutsy stance for working and middle-class adults, because as a whole our financial situation tends to be extremely volatile. There may well come a day where you can't participate in the economy either. It's not an over-exaggeration to say that rising debt levels and decreased savings are putting millions of North Americans at risk for homelessness. In Canada, the average consumer debt amounts to 170% of disposable income, and as the recent U.S. government shutdown highlighted, millions of Americans don't have enough savings to cover even a $400 unexpected expense. The get a job response to homelessness has become just one of many dog whistles or fallacies on the issue that far too many people have been sold on without all the facts or context. Why should my taxes pay for lazy people to stay lazy? Let's put aside the obvious and baseless moral judgment of this sentiment for a second and pretend it's based on a noble concern for responsible government spending. Most conservatives I know tend to have this knee-jerk reaction to people getting something for nothing, and many tend to believe that superfluous social spending will disincentivize people from working for their own living. While I don't necessarily disagree that there will always be people out there looking to game the system, the perceived severity of this problem typically gets blown way out of proportion. Not only do people generally try to avoid using social assistance and the stigma that comes with it at all costs, it's actually way cheaper to provide proactive services and support than to fund reactionary or emergency services. For example, it costs almost $70,000 per year to house one provincial inmate, and in the federal system the price tag gets much higher at almost $120,000 for a male inmate or $215,000 for females. For the chronically homeless who manage to avoid prison, the cost of increased emergency and healthcare services, temporary group shelter services, and addiction treatment support adds up to a similar strain on tax dollars. One report by CBC summarizes that there are roughly 235,000 Canadians who find themselves homeless per year, and the average services for homeless in major cities is $50,000 per person. So no matter what, we are already paying billions of dollars every year on public services related to homelessness. Comparatively, supportive housing that follows a housing-first philosophy, more on this later, for addicts and other high-risk populations in Canada costs only $13,000 to $18,000 a year per person. Photo by Matt Colomer on Unsplash. The government should be investing money in young people and preventing homelessness before it starts. From a political perspective, it's far more appealing to invest resources into children and young adults who are at risk or already living in poverty. It's understandable that well-intentioned people want to believe they can stop homelessness before it happens by setting young people on the right path to success, but it's still an incomplete and inadequate approach to the problem. While it is of course vitally important to support high-risk youth, too often such assistance completely evaporates as soon as the child turns 18. It's almost as though once they've legally become an adult they aren't considered as appealing or as worthy of cause. This is especially unfair to teens in foster care today, as student debt and cost of living skyrockets in so many urban areas. Adult children are living with their parents longer and longer out of financial necessity. Former foster children don't have that advantage, and for all intents and purposes are on their own. Between insanely competitive job markets, soaring costs of living in urban housing markets, and aging out of care, it's no wonder that 3 out of 5 homeless youth in Canada were once part of the child welfare system. If we were truly serious about empowering high-risk youth to provide for themselves independently, at the very least we need to update our current system to keep pace with the times and extend aftercare services for youth in care until at minimum, age 25. We shouldn't be giving people welfare and a place to live if they're just going to spend that money on drugs, booze. The idea of providing social assistance and/or housing to people who are still using on a daily basis provokes a visceral reaction among many taxpayers. Some people even call for the administration of random drug testing to all who receive government funding to prevent just such a situation. However, a system which makes housing or assistance contingent on sobriety starts to break down pretty quickly under closer scrutiny. For starters, drug testing for tens of thousands of people is prohibitively expensive. As much as conservatives may love the idea in theory, most who occupy a policy-making position already know it's fiscally out of the question. There is arguably more recognition today that addiction is a legitimate mental illness requiring specialized treatment, and yet requiring sobriety as a prerequisite to social services such as housing remains a strongly held and widespread ideology. Most people require multiple attempts at treatment before they are able to maintain long-term sobriety, and even one round of such treatment can cost tens of thousands of dollars. If an individual graduates from a standard 30-day program and is still homeless, they are almost certain to relapse, while they wait for weeks or months for a space in a sober housing program, and will typically need to start another treatment program all over again anyway. Recognizing that complex mental health and addictions needs are much more productively addressed if people already have a place to live, Dr. Sam Semberis developed a groundbreaking service model, now known as Housing First. In the early 1990s, more and more cities across North America are adopting the Housing First philosophy, and with good reason. Providing immediate supportive housing as a first step to recovery ensures that people can attend treatment when they are ready, and have somewhere to go when they are finished. Given all that we know about the costs associated with homelessness, a Housing First model is highly attractive fiscally as well, depending on the needs of the residents involved. Housing First programs cost between $14,000 and $23,000 per person, compared to the aforementioned $50,000 in services for homeless. Regardless of your political leanings or level of personal concern for people experiencing homelessness and addiction, it's become clear that it's a complex social problem that we need to start approaching differently than we have in the past. There might not be a perfect, one-size-fits-all solution, but one thing that's for sure is that unrealistic and judgmental expectations or policies which set people up to fail are making an already bad situation worse. More from Jesse B. Narcan is not the solution to the opioid crisis. It's a miracle drug, and it saves lives, but not without a cost.